Big week of fantasy football coming up. Not a ton of time to waste, so just make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. And let's get into the first tier of wide receivers here. We've got Justin Jefferson at number 1, Jamar Chase at number 2. Obviously, with these two guys, they're our elite guys. They're the guys with the consistent ceiling, and Justin Jefferson obviously just has the superb floor. And the good thing with Detroit is that they're actually a good matchup for a wide receiver. The Lions' run defense is excellent. Their pass defense is the weak one. That's why Justin Jefferson, you could totally rely on him coming out of the bye week. Jamar Chase at number 2 at the Cleveland Browns here. You know, they actually played the Eagles a lot tougher, but the reality is that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith had both good games. Like, they're still not a very good defense. The Eagles were just sputtering offensively. The good thing with Jamar Chase and the Bengals is they're throwing the ball really well. Joe Burrow's having a low-key, really good season if you just take out a couple of interceptions here. Burrow is delivering to Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase missed out on a big play last week. I'm expecting him to rebound and have a big play against the Browns this week. A.J. Brown at 3 and Malik Neighbors at number 4. With A.J. Brown at the New York Giants this week, I really do think that the matchup is really good. Again, the only reason Jamar Chase didn't have a better game is because he actually dropped a ball over the middle of the field that he could have easily gotten like a 30-yard gain for because he saw space and just took his eyes off the ball. A.J. Brown has just been crushing it. In both games he's played this year, he's averaging basically 20 fantasy points per game. I want A.J. Brown in every single scenario here, and conversely in the same matchup, this whole Malik Neighbors thing's gotten weird. Obviously, like, I don't know if he's going to play. I sure hope he plays because the upside that he has is ridiculous. Obviously, don't forget this about Malik Neighbors. He's been an elite fantasy player at the wide receiver position. Versus the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously questionable still with that concussion that he suffered in what, week 4? Week 5 at this point? I mean, it's been a while since we've seen, no, it was week 4. It's been a while since we've seen Malik Neighbors here. So, obviously, if he plays, don't forget how good this guy is. This guy is so much of everything of what the Giants do offensively. He's the reason that they can score points on a consistent basis, and he also will help open up the run game. If Malik Neighbors is back, there's no way you sit him, and he belongs inside of the first tier. Dropping down to our next tier right here. We've got a good packed tier of great options here that I don't really feel bad about any of them. With Amon-Ra St. Brown at 5, Mike Evans at 6. Obviously, I feel really great about these guys having rebound games off of some slump games here. With Amon-Ra St. Brown, they just didn't need him. Like, they were killing the Cowboys. That was a statement win that they did. They beat them up to a pulp at their home field in Dallas. At Minnesota this week, I think that this matchup is really tough. Like, if you look at what the Vikings defense does, they're obviously fantastic. Brian Flores is running a great defensive unit over there. But the other thing about this one is this is going to be a much more competitive game. Hence, they'll need Amon-Ra St. Brown more. And with the Detroit Lions, they're one of the few offenses in the league that you do not account for what the matchup is really in particular because they've got such a potent offense they can get points anywhere, and that opens up the field for all their options. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's going to be just fine. Mike Evans, obviously last week I had him low ranked. I explained the reasons why, because anytime he faces Marshawn Lattimore of the Saints, that's a bad matchup. This is different. Jamar Chase just ripped them apart a couple weeks ago. They let Terry McLaurin just rip them apart. The Ravens are a good matchup. It's a Monday night game at home for Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is coming off a 50-point performance here, and Baltimore's giving up points to wide receivers here. Mike Evans is going to bounce back this week. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if he was a top 3 guy this week, but I've got him here at 6. Number 7 and 8, Jaden Reed and Drake London here. Jaden Reed, you just continue to play him. Like, he got a touchdown early in that game versus Arizona and ended up kind of being irrelevant for a lot of that time afterwards. This is just kind of what happens with Jaden. He's Deebo Samuel. He's going to get you major weeks, and he's going to get you some weeks that are not as great. Jaden's matchup against Houston, again, it's like Amon-Ra St. Brown's, where they're not going to kill the Texans as easily as they killed the Cardinals. They're going to be in this matchup with the Texans, I think, and that's going to open up just more opportunities late in the game for Jaden Reed to recover fantasy points that he may have missed out on in the second quarter. So I'm big on Jaden Reed this week. And then Drake London. I was wrong. I mean, I was flat out wrong about Drake London. He's fantastic in fantasy. I mean, you do not sit Drake London under any circumstances. It's clicking with Kirk Cousins. He's clearly the number one. He had another very good week against the Carolina Panthers. And again, the matchup here is excellent. Seattle's getting ravaged with injuries, and they are giving up tons of points to opposing running backs, to opposing wide receivers, to opposing quarterbacks. Everybody's having fun against the Seahawks defense because they're just ravaged with injuries. Drake London is a must play, and he's here at number 8. Deebo Samuel at 9. Chris Godwin at number 10 to round out the tier. Deebo Samuel versus the Kansas City Chiefs. It's a big matchup, and they don't have Christian McCaffrey. Deebo Samuel hits a big ceiling game, and the irony is he only had 3 catches in that game. But the other thing is that he's handling a bunch of carries on a per-game basis. So obviously that's where Deebo gets a lot of his fantasy upside from. He's getting the carries, and this is just simply a game that they're going to need Deebo Samuel to have a Deebo Samuel type of game in. I've got trust in Deebo Samuel because Kansas City's coming off a bye week. But Deebo Samuel and the San Francisco 49ers, they're coming off a Thursday night game. So that's a 10-day rest period right there. So they got a little bit of a mini bye week this weekend. I like Deebo Samuel and the 49ers as a whole. And then with Chris Godwin versus the Baltimore Ravens, it's exactly what I said with Mike. Obviously, it's hard to see Chris Godwin and Mike being both top 10 guys. It's happened before, and it could happen against the Ravens. This is just me showing you that obviously coming off a massive week, we know what Godwin's potential is. He's getting the targets on a per-game basis that are always going to be consistent. But the one thing that really puts me over the top is the matchup upside. I like the upside for both of these guys. That's why Chris Godwin is top 10, along with Mike Evans here. Dropping out to our next tier, Garrett Wilson at number 11 and Cooper Kupp at number 12. With Garrett Wilson, he's starting to turn it up too. And this is exactly what I saw coming when I called him a buy low trade target several weeks ago, and it was scoffed at. The idea was laughed off, and it was scoffed at by many. Garrett Wilson's coming through. He's the number one target, clearly, for Aaron Rodgers. Although Lazard's involved, Garrett Wilson's the guy that you want in this offense because he obviously has the big play upside outside of a Hail Mary that Allen Lazard caught in the Monday night game. Garrett Wilson against the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've been getting ripped up by receivers. Don't look at the Raiders game last week as proof that the Steelers have all of a sudden turned a new leaf against receivers. They haven't. They played the Raiders. Like, that doesn't count. Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers on Sunday night. I like the opportunity here against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then Cooper Kupp at number 12 makes it in here. Of course, Cooper Kupp has the potential to return this week because, of course, he had a big workout on Monday to see where he was at. He was telling McVay he was feeling good. McVay comes back afterwards, says, yeah, he actually looks pretty good. Like, he's got a chance to play this week. Obviously, watch this one throughout the week. But the moment that Cooper Kupp returns, he's obviously got top 12 upside. The targets will be there right away with Cooper Kupp. The moment he can play, you play him. And against the Raiders this week, you definitely play him if he plays. Cooper Kupp, just make sure to watch this one. But don't forget, 20-plus targets in week 2. That's what the upside he can bring you is. Week 1, a really strong week as well. Cooper Kupp is a great fantasy receiver when he is available. You play Cooper Kupp if he's available. Stephon Diggs at 13 and Terry McLaurin at 14 here. With Stephon Diggs, I just think that this guy proved exactly what I thought was going to happen versus the New England Patriots. Stephon Diggs' role has been very consistent. I don't really particularly see like a major upgrade as far as him being like a really good wide receiver 2 to like a wide receiver 1. He's still serving the same role, basically. The guy who's coming in to fill out the big plays, yeah, that's Tank Dell, who I actually called a buy low last week as well. Stephon Diggs is a guy that you just want to continue playing because the target share is really consistent with or without Nico Collins. He's getting high upside opportunities, shorter routes, red zone opportunities as well. So against the Green Bay Packers, which could very well be a shootout, I want Stephon Diggs, and I want options in this matchup in fantasy. And then Terry McLaurin versus the Carolina Panthers, I think is in great position. Terry McLaurin is in position now to where he is legitimately a potential league winner at wide receiver. I called him a league winner before the year, and I have never been a big Terry McLaurin guy, but Jaden Daniels has changed everything, similarly to what Justin Fields did last year for DJ Moore. This is what Terry McLaurin is seeing. Against the Panthers, the matchup is excellent, but Terry's on such a hot streak right now that if you put him on your bench, I don't know why you're doing it. because he's so hot right now. The matchup is great again. You play Terry McLaurin. You're not going to have to sweat out Terry McLaurin having a good fantasy week, just like you actually might have to stress out about Bo Nix hitting his projection on Underdog this week. It's at 0.5 total yards. Of course he's going to hit it, but it may take him a half to do it. But you've got to hit the higher on this projection right here. So if you haven't done so yet and you want to take advantage of it, go down in the comments, grab the link that's there. And when you use code FN to sign up for Underdog, they'll match your first deposit 50%, up to $1,000 bonus cash. And you'll be able to take advantage of hitting the higher on the Bo Nix projection this week on Underdog. Dropping down to our next tier right here. At 15, I've got Brian Thomas Jr. versus the New England Patriots. And at 16, I've got Deontay Johnson at the Washington Commanders as well. With Brian Thomas Jr., the rebound is coming this week. He's going to be just fine. He took on the Chicago Bears last week. The Bears are a great defense, but realistically, I think they may have the best secondary, if not one of the top three. I mean, there's not many receivers who are putting up big numbers against the Chicago Bears outside of what Houston did in week 2. The Brian Thomas Jr. saga is definitely not over. This guy is the number one in this offense. Evan Ingram definitely puts a damper on the target amount that he may get on a per week basis, but he's still the big play threat. He dropped a touchdown versus the Chicago Bears. I expect him to rebound this week because he's just got a better matchup here against the New England Patriots. And then Deontay Johnson at number 16. At Washington, the matchup is great with him too. Washington can't cover and pass to save their lives. So Deontay Johnson comes back in the lineup last week, obviously does exactly what I expected him to do, which was a rebound. He's a good player in fantasy as long as Andy Dalton's out there. And guess what? It's going to be Andy Dalton again, by all accounts. You play Deontay Johnson 100% against the Washington Commanders. And I've got DK Metcalf at 17 here. Yeah, we're kind of back to where I was feeling about DK Metcalf before the start of the season. DK Metcalf at the Atlanta Falcons here. Matchup should theoretically be pretty good. But DK Metcalf is experiencing a problem, and it's Geno Smith, and I don't think he's absolved the blame either. He's having his own issues for why he has just not been very good in fantasy lately. With DK Metcalf, you can't rank him outside the top 20 because he has that big playability. He does have the big playability, so ultimately, DK, you have to acknowledge that big playability, but there's a lot of other options I like better because he's just not a consistent target right now for them. Jackson Smith-Njigba seeing tons of targets on a per game basis. Tyler Lockett's more involved this week. I just think DK Metcalf is a dice roll here, but one that obviously presents a lot of upside. And then to round out the tier, T. Higgins and Devonta Smith are two wide receiver twos that are excellent in fantasy. T. Higgins at Cleveland, again, the matchup here for both Jamar and T, very, very plus. This Browns defense is ravaged with injuries. They're a bad team overall. So I just think that T. Higgins easily could have another touchdown this week. I like T. Higgins. This is a guy that you really could feel comfortable playing every week because, number one, he has the big play upside for touchdowns. Number two, this guy's getting like 8-9 targets a game. I mean, he is consistently being targeted by Burrow because they're just throwing the ball a ton. So T. Higgins inside the top 20, 100%. And Devonta Smith comes back, has a touchdown. Really only has a couple big plays, but against the New York Giants here, I do expect this one to be actually pretty competitive as well. So with Devonta Smith, the only thing I'll say, and this goes back to my preseason issues with the Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Hurts does not look his greatest. Like, he just doesn't look like the same player as he did in 2022. He obviously provides the upside with these wide receivers here, but he gets a bump down in my rankings because of Jalen Hurts' struggles that he's experiencing on a throw-to-throw basis. It just doesn't always look as great with Hurts, and I do think that Devonta, more than AJ, will be the one suffering from that in future weeks. And I think the Giants actually have a really good defense that could really create issues here. Dropping down to our next tier right here. Zay Flowers at number 20 and Khalil Shakir at 21. I'll probably hear gripes about Zay Flowers. Why isn't he higher? Why isn't he higher? Listen, I can understand it to a certain point. But again, several weeks ago, a lot of you were asking me, Zay Flowers, do I drop him? Do I bench him for, Rashid Shaheed? It's like, well, you need to know what to expect with Zay Flowers. The guy's going to be consistently targeted, but sometimes there's going to be weeks where his targets are all at the line of scrimmage and he only gets you 6 catches for 30 yards. That's what he can do. He also can do what he's done the past 2 weeks. Gets you big explosion games. So obviously you want him against the Bucks secondary here, but realistically I just don't think that I trust his floor combination with his ceiling on a consistent basis here. So I just think that at Tampa Bay this week, I think Zay Flowers is a good option, but not the best option. And then Khalil Shakir obviously doesn't do much on Monday night for Buffalo. He was working his way back from an injury. I think he ultimately comes back versus Tennessee and has a much better performance. Much more involvement in this game because realistically, this offense and Josh Allen is not the same without Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir is his definite best option at wide receiver. We will see that come back to fruition unless he suffered a setback of his injury of some type. I think Khalil Shakir is going to be a good play against the Tennessee Titans. Tank Dell at 22, Jameson Williams at 23. Tank Dell at Green Bay this week, I think the matchup is going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to watch, and I want guys in this matchup. And Tank Dell comes in clutch in week 6, and it's exactly how I thought it would go. He's the big play guy all of a sudden again. He's getting red zone opportunities too. Tank Dell is getting opportunities like he had last year with CJ Stroud. He just kind of needed that opportunity to open up by either Nico leaving the lineup or Stephon Diggs. It's unfortunate circumstances, but this is kind of what Tank Dell needed to get the ball rolling here. So with Tank Dell, I expect the chemistry with CJ Stroud to continue to show itself against the defense that is definitely really good in fantasy, but also beatable through the air. And then with Jameson Williams at 23 at Minnesota this week, again, I want options in this matchup. And Jameson Williams, this is not an easy matchup here. A lot of these guys with Tank Dell, behind Tank Dell, with Jameson Williams, and the next several guys on the list here, Xavier Worthy, Brandon Ayuk, Tyreek Hill, they obviously all have big play upside, but they're all relative dart throws in fantasy football this week. This is not a sure thing if you're trying to go with Jameson Williams as a wide receiver too. This is more of a flex play this week that I prefer. But Jameson Williams, of course, has the big play upside, and his role in this offense, it's not getting 10 targets a game anymore, but what it is consistently getting him open because their offense is so efficient on every level. The running game opens up the pass game. Amon-Ra St. Brown is targets over the middle, opens up the deep shot, and that's where Jameson Williams comes through. So I just trust this offense and their process to get Jameson Williams a good fantasy week. Xavier Worthy, like I said, against San Francisco, he's my favorite matchup of the Chiefs wide receivers. He's my favorite option of all of them. Definitely not Juju Smith-Schuster, I just don't trust him enough. But Xavier Worthy was more involved without Rashee Rice, and so I'm just expecting that to continue. I'm expecting more from Xavier Worthy in this lineup. At the 49ers, it's obviously a major game with major implications. Got to keep the win streak alive, and San Fran is the Super Bowl matchup here. So I just trust Xavier Worthy the most out of Kansas City options to continue to build his rapport with Patrick Mahomes and continue to just see more opportunities because they did it in week 5. I don't see anything stopping them from doing it again in week 6. Brandon Ayuk and Tyreek Hill at 25 and 26 to round it out. Brandon Ayuk, again, in this matchup, I want options here, but he's obviously the scariest one. But again, these guys all have the big play upside. Ayuk definitely does, and it would not surprise me at all if we see Ayuk have another big game. My problem is I don't really want to predict it at this point with Ayuk, because there was times in that game against the Seahawks on Thursday night where he had opportunities and he was open and Brock just wasn't looking for him. So maybe there will be more of a point of emphasis this week to get Ayuk involved. But I got to say, I definitely don't feel as good about Ayuk this week as I did heading into last week, that's for sure. And then with Tyreek Hill, wake me up when Tua's back. I mean, seriously, Tyreek's upside without Tua is so capped. And it's so sad, honestly, guys. It really does depress me. Because obviously Tyreek is great, and we want what we know we can get from Tyreek Hill, which is why he's still inside the top 30. But realistically, over the bye week, I had to really reassess where I was ranking Tyreek Hill, and this is where I ended up putting him. In this range of guys who are also big play threats, but just very, very low floors. That's exactly what Tyreek Hill is at this point. Dropping now to our last tier right here. Demario Douglas makes his debut on the top 30, and Jordan Addison at 28 here. Demario Douglas this week in London, overseas, versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. This whole game has been totally changed by Drake May being in there. It's totally changed this whole game. I really like Demario Douglas this week because as long as May plays, he actually provides upside, and this matchup is so strong, so capable to take advantage of it. I actually really like Demario Douglas because he's the #1 target, and Drake May actually provides upside in this wide receiver room. I really like Demario Douglas this week. Jordan Addison versus Detroit, definitely in the matchup that I just want points in. Jordan Addison, it's a little hard to tell. He's had one really big boom game, and he's had one bad game since he returned from injury. A little harder to tell. Definitely a boomer bust guy. Take your shot on however you want to do it. I prefer Demario Douglas over him personally. And then Darnell Mooney at 29 and Jacoby Myers at 30, rounding it out. Darnell Mooney goes back to reality, has a little bit of a lower game, and really that's just kind of what we should expect from Darnell Mooney, is that he is just not going to be consistently getting you 30 points. Like, that's just an unlikely thing to happen. With that being said, the matchup versus Seattle is a great one that I definitely want, and Darnell Mooney, you can still count on him to consistently see you 6 to 7 targets per game, making him a good option regardless in a PPR format that I would prefer over someone like a Wan'Dale Robinson. And then Jacoby Myers at 30. Obviously, dude's got to play to make this list. Jacoby Myers ends up sitting out last week after reports earlier in the week were really positive on him. So I was really confused with what happened. So Jacoby Myers at the Rams has a good opportunity here to be a really solid PPR play, get 10 or 11 targets and 6 catches for 80 yards or something like that. But obviously, watch the injury report on this one. And as I do at the end of every single wide receiver ranking video, I give you my favorite underdog wide receiver pick of the week. If you are playing an underdog best ball drafts that they do daily over there on Underdog. And this guy, I feel like I'm throwing it back to 2018, 2019, because I never thought he'd see the day where I would be talking about this guy in a positive light again. Juju Smith-Schuster at the San Francisco 49ers. I actually want in on him on Underdog this week. This guy came in and was the best receiver by far in fantasy football for the Kansas City Chiefs against the Saints. Like, this guy all of a sudden kind of looks like their target guy. So if we're getting like a consistent 8 targets from Juju, the fact is he plays with Mahomes. I want a piece of him. And in a matchup where I think that this could be a good scoring game, yeah, I'm taking Juju Smith-Schuster as my underdog wide receiver of the week. So let me know how your lineup looks heading into the weekend. If you want to see the buy low trade targets to get before week 7, click on this video right here.